On today's show, the Hawks fall just short of their first victory in Las Vegas. I'll have a full breakdown of the game. Unfortunately, the injuries for Atlanta and much more, and all that is coming up.
You are Locked On Hawks, your daily Atlanta Hawks podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello, friends. Welcome to episode 1767 of the Locked On Hawks podcast. I am your host, Brad Rowland, coming to you deep into the night here on a Wednesday evening into Thursday. And today's podcast brought to the folks at the Gametime app. Download the Gametime app right now, create an account, and use promo code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. I also want to encourage you at the top of the podcast to make us your first listen each and every day here at Locked On Hawks. Please subscribe to this podcast anywhere you might find podcasts. That includes Apple and Spotify and Overcast. Also, if you're watching on YouTube, go ahead and like this episode as you are watching it, and then please subscribe and enable notifications on that platform as well. And please be sure to tell your friends about this podcast. If you've missed it, we've been covering the Hawks Summer League journey out here in Las Vegas. I'm still in the desert right now. Full coverage of the first two games, plus another show on Tuesday, in which I broke down the Nikola Jurisic injury, unfortunately, for Atlanta, and all the details on Vit Krejci's free agent contract and more. That's a very relevant show even now. But again, it is Wednesday night into Thursday. The Hawks had their third Summer League game this evening. It was supposed to be the headliner of Risacher against Bronny James and Dalton Connect. That did not happen, as we'll get into in a second. But ultimately, the Hawks fall by a final score of 87-86. And the second half was, let's just say, diametrically opposed. The third quarter was all Hawks. The fourth quarter was all Lakers. And that kind of kept to the this whole theme basically of the close losses for the Hawks in Las Vegas. But beyond the actual results, we'll get into kind of how this game unfolded in a second. But by far, the biggest theme of this one, unfortunately for Atlanta, is the injuries. So about an hour and a half before tip-off, which was a late game, it was a 9:30 Eastern time start because it was ESPN, it was Bronny James, etc. The Hawks let a few media folks, including me, know that both Zaccharie Risacher and Dylan Windler would not be playing in the game. Obviously, Windler isn't the most high-profile guy, even though he's one of the better players on the Summer League roster. But Risacher, the number one overall pick, has a right quad contusion. Now, I've asked around, both on the record and off the record. I asked Ronald Norred, the Hawks Summer League coach, after the game. Everyone seems to be in the TBD mode with regard to whether Risacher is going to be done for the summer or not. And by the summer, I mean this week in Summer League. He could play again. They have not ruled him out at this point in time. With Jurisic, it was very clear right away he was going to be out for the rest of Summer League. This is not that at this point in time. Again, it would not surprise me if he was out, but it wouldn't shock me either if he played on Friday when the Hawks played again. But that's kind of the latest there. I'm not sure how serious it is. It doesn't seem to be that serious. He was up and moving on the Hawks bench throughout this game and was around the team. But obviously, I think it goes without saying, but in case I need to say it out loud, and Norred said this too, like, you want to be careful. There's no reason to push anything with the number one overall pick in a Summer League setting. These games do not matter. Obviously, they're helpful for development and seeing what guys can do, but he looked the part of what the Hawks wanted him to look like in the first two games. And clearly, if there's any question whatsoever, you're going to lean to not playing a guy who you are planning to have be around your franchise for a very long time. Of course, those two guys were part of the starting lineup in the first two games. They joined Kobe Buffkin, who, of course, got hurt in practice before they even left for Vegas. And then Nikola Jurisic, who got his foot fractured on Sunday in the first half. And then, I'm not done. In the second half of this game on Wednesday night, Gueye, the Hawks second round pick from last year, suffered a hip contusion and was ruled out for the rest of the game for another injury. So, coming into the game tonight, about an hour before tip-off, 4 of the 5 draft picks that the Hawks have made in the last 2 years were injured, basically. Plus, another guy in Windler who ended last season on a 2-way contract was also out. Then, during the game, the 5th draft pick got injured. So, essentially, all 5 of the Hawks draft picks in the last 2 seasons, as of right now, are injured to some degree. It's pretty hard to talk about, but it is what it is. They did have 3 guys for most of this game that were roster players. Gueye got hurt during the game, but along with him, Keaton Wallace is on a 2-way contract, we'll actually talk about a little bit more later. And then EJ Liddell, who the Hawks brought in the DeJounte Murray trade, is on a guaranteed contract. So I'll say this. I have covered Summer League teams that had less guys on the roster than the team did tonight that was playing. but it still was a huge letdown. I'm not going to lie to you on the podcast. And on the Lakers side, they also didn't have Dalton Connect. So on Sunday, the Hawks faced a Spurs team that only really has one prime prospect in Steph Castle, and he got hurt and missed that game. Tonight, Dalton Connect has a minor injury, and he's their first-round pick for the Lakers. Yes, Bronny James is a much more famous basketball player right now than Dalton Connect, but Dalton Connect is their best basketball player as far as the Lakers prospect is concerned. They do have Colin Castleton is a real prospect as a big, but still, it was kind of a lost luster kind of game, and that happens. But big picture, before we sort of drill down to kind of what happened in this game, it was a mixed bag. The first half, I have to say, was really, really hard to watch at times. The Hawks had a disastrous start, which we'll come back to later on in the podcast, but they did come back and recover, and were only down by 3 at halftime. The third quarter was all Hawks. They scored 31 points in a 10-minute period in the third quarter. Lots of positivity from Rowland about that performance. And then the fourth quarter, it got a little bit uneven for Atlanta, to be sure. As far as their stats are concerned for the full game, they look okay. They shot 40% from the field and 37% from three on pretty good volume over 40 minutes. They got to the line 24 times. That was actually double what the Lakers did in this game. So the fundamentals there were pretty good. They had 10 offensive rebounds. That was enough, I would say, in this game. They did have some defensive rebounding trouble. They allowed 17 second chance points in this one, but lots and lots of turnovers, which is kind of a summer league staple, I have to say. But they had 18 in a 40-minute game, and they led directly to 25 points for the Lakers. That was arguably the difference in the game on the margins in this game. And the Hawks only had 19 assists. So 19 assists, 18 turnovers is not the ratio that you want, of course, whereas the Lakers had 14 turnovers, which is obviously not great, but it's probably more fine, and 23 assists. So the Hawks stayed in this game because they were much better from three and from the free throw line, and honestly in transition as well. And the Lakers won it because they were better inside the arc, and they also took care of the ball a little bit better than the Hawks did. But it was, in the end, a 1-point game was probably appropriate for how this game actually played out along the way. I do have a clip I'll play for you later on about Ronald Norrie, kind of the messaging to the Hawks from this point forward. But essentially, it wasn't terribly downbeat after the game. The Hawks did compete well. They did play reasonably well after the first 5 minutes of the game. Of course, they all count, but they are 0-3 at this point in time. And now, by the way, I can kind of tell you now, honestly, there's some news in the last half hour or so when the Hawks will be playing again. They were already going to be playing on Friday. That was a game that was locked in. It's a 6 o'clock start. That was previously scheduled. But now their fifth and final game, which was always going to be on the schedule for either Saturday or Sunday, has been set. It is actually on Saturday at 6 p.m. Eastern time against the Knicks on ESPN. So an earlier game for those of you that don't want to stay up too late. And also a Saturday game to kind of wrap things up in Las Vegas. The league announced basically half of the schedule because the teams that are eliminated can be scheduled. And the Hawks are now eliminated from the actual Summer League championship run. So there you go on that front. So anyway, that's what I have at the top of the podcast. We will get into the kind of the nuts and bolts of this one. I'll get my player-by-player breakdowns and share some audio with you from Ronald Norrie at the end of the podcast. But first, a word from our friends at Gametime. Today's show is brought to you by Gametime, and Gametime is an authorized ticket marketplace of Major League Baseball. They'll help you get your baseball tickets and your basketball tickets, as well as anything really in the sports world. They help you do it faster and easier with last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seats, and the lowest possible price guarantee. That all makes Gametime a fantastic option to make things easy for you in the ticketing space. I've been using the Gametime app for quite some time now. It's come in handy for me a ton of different times when looking at tickets for the Braves, for the Falcons, Atlanta United, as well as shows and concerts across the city of Atlanta and beyond. At Gametime, save big when you're buying last minute tickets for sports, concerts, comedy, theater, and much more. They have flash deals. We actually save even more and save even bigger when you choose a section and let Gametime choose the seats for you within that section. They also have an awesome feature, one of my personal favorites, where you actually toggle to show up the total beforehand, up front. No surprise fees when you get to the checkout screen. That's huge for me for planning purposes. And you also get a panoramic view of your seats in the app before you buy them. And you are always getting the lowest possible price with the folks at Gametime. Take all the guesswork out of buying tickets with the Gametime app. Download the Gametime app right now, create an account, and use promo code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create that account and use promo code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Download the Gametime app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. All right, to the nuts and bolts of this game, and with all the injuries that took place, they had a different starting lineup, as you might imagine. In this one, they had Keaton, Wallace, and Gueye starting as the two roster guys that were starting in this one, along with Rob Baker, who's been starting all week long at center, then Moses Wood, and then Emmett Matthews Jr. So Matthews actually had not played to this point. He actually started after not playing at all. He played 14 minutes, only took one shot. He's a 6'7" wing, did not play at all again in the first two games. Played at West Virginia and Washington at the college level. Spent time in College Park last year. Played 30 games for College Park in a fairly small role, but was still around. And that's been a theme all week long about the Hawks having so much cohesion with these guys who played in College Park. They purposely basically brought the entire Skyhawks roster and then added in the NBA guys, the rookies, et cetera, for that cohesion part of things. Anyway, from there, the Hawks had this disastrous start, which I mentioned before. They were down 12-2 at the first timeout of the game, only had 2 points in the first 5 full minutes, and that is essentially why they lost this game in the end. Now, that's obviously a little bit reductive, but the Hawks were brutal in the early going. They had 2 turnovers in the first three possessions. They had another one that was shortly after that. They were 1 away from the field. Mercifully, Gueye broke that drought with a 3, but it was actually kind of a bad shot that he even made at that point in time. He did have a couple nice plays after that in transition, kind of with his motor running hot as it has been all week. I thought Wallace struggled early offensively, but then once he settled in, he was pretty darn good from that point in time as the newly appointed two-way guy for the Hawks. Rotationally, I mentioned the starters. They actually played Jordan Bowden for his first time this week in Las Vegas. He played actually a decent chunk of minutes. I believe it was, about 30 minutes actually after not playing at all to this point. He is a former Tennessee wing, if you recognize him from that. Also played in College Park, like everybody else almost did this last season. So right now, the Hawks only have one guy on their Summer League roster who has not played to this point, and that is Nick Ongenda, the third big man, basically, for Atlanta. But they did end up playing E.J. Liddell and Jarkel Joyner after that. I thought Joyner was one of the best players in this game pretty clearly, and it seemed like Rowland Nora seemed to agree with that. After the game, they played Miles Norris after he did not play, kind of surprisingly, on Sunday. He made back-to-back threes once he checked in the game. He's playing some center, essentially, next to E.J. Liddell in the front court. After that hilariously poor start from Atlanta, they were still within 1 at the end of the first quarter. They won the free throw battle and rebounding battle at this point in time. They actually took 11 threes and made 4 of them in the first quarter, while the Lakers didn't make any. So that was kind of the difference there. They played some lineups in this game that I didn't love necessarily. They played a lineup that didn't have Liddell, Gueye, or Wallace on the court, and that was not the best necessarily. Once they came back in, though, they righted the ship a little bit. Joyner was really good, a couple pull-up threes, good defense at the point of attack. Still kind of an overall mess of a half, I would say, kind of peak Summer League grossness in a lot of ways. They shot 33% from 2-point range in the first half with 11 giveaways, and they were only down by 3, though, because they won on the margins. In the second half, it was night and day, I would say, especially in the third quarter. The Hawks made 3 threes in the first 90 seconds of the third quarter. Gueye hit 1, Moses Wood made 1, and then Rob Baker made 1. The Baker one was actually set up really nicely by Gueye, and a nice bit of playmaking from him. Not a hugely special pass, but certainly one that was really good to see from Mo, kind of making a nice processing play. The Hawks actually led by 6 at that point in time after trailing for the vast majority of the first half. Liddell had this awesome chase down block in the third quarter. Also a nice moment in transition with a lob from Joyner to Wallace, who had played together a lot in College Park last year as well in the backcourt. And also, that was the best stint of Rob Baker's week by a wide margin in the third quarter. Overall, it was a 23-7 run from the Hawks to begin the second half, to go from down 3 to up 13 in about 6 minutes. It was much more aesthetically pleasing, I would say, as well. They were playing faster, less turnovers, like just less of a mess, mostly on both sides. The lead did though start to dwindle down to 3 by the end of the fourth quarter. Turnovers kind of rear their ugly heads again. I will say again, Joyner was really good for the most part, making some shots. The Hawks definitely did miss Gueye though in the fourth quarter. I don't think Mo's had the best week necessarily, but I think he definitely has been one of their better defenders around the rim, and his absence was definitely notable in the fourth quarter. Bronny hit a 3 that was controversial, kind of a no call, maybe out of bounds late in the fourth quarter to tie the game. Baker then airballed a free throw. I won't give you the entire back and forth, but the Hawks were down between 1 and 3 points for the last 4 minutes of this game. Jordan had a nice finish to get back within 1, but then a really, really rough interior defensive sequence to allow an easy bucket for the Lakers. They finally brought Miles Norris back in for Baker, probably a little bit too late, but he actually made a 3 above the break to get back within 1 at the very end of the game. They actually got a steal in transition with 30 seconds to go, down by 1, and then Joyner got fouled. So the Hawks had a dead ball down by 1 with about 12 seconds to go. So they had a chance to win it, and they failed to get a shot off. If you have not seen the play, Joyner got pressured a little bit, although he was quite good in this game. He didn't kind of figure out the clock fast enough. Took maybe one too many dribbles, tried to pass it out for a shot, and it was just too late to go ahead and do that. So the Hawks had an ugly end to that possession and end of the game. Hard to be too upset about that. It was kind of a very summer league play, not the well executed situation that you might seem during the regular season, but still, they didn't play badly again in this game after the first 5 minutes. The first 5 minutes were really bad. I have to say they were awful, but there you have it on that front. Okay. That's the rundown of how this game kind of unfolded. I already gave you the numbers earlier in the podcast, but one more time, the Hawks just didn't shoot it very well inside the arc. They were 13 of 29 on twos in this game. That's going to get you beat more often than not. And for the most part, no one was finishing well around the rim. Other than, you could certainly say that Joyner was okay, but Liddell struggled in this one. We'll get to that in a second as far as his scoring is concerned. But in the end, a 1 point loss. And we'll get into the player stuff in a second to end this podcast and how I kind of evaluated all the guys who appeared in this contest. But first, a quick word from our partners. All right, before we sign off, some player-by-player evaluation stuff along with some audio. So on the positive side, I thought Jarkel Joyner was really good in this game. Now, he's not really a prospect necessarily for the Hawks. Wallace is a bigger prospect than he is, but Joyner is a guy that the Hawks have always liked. Norred likes him quite a bit. He ended up with 17 points off the bench to tie for the team lead with Rob Baker, 5 rebounds, 4 assists, 2 steals. And I actually asked Norred about Joyner after the game. Here's what he had to say about Jarkel.
It's been every game. It's who he is. It's what I love about him. It's what everybody loves about him. He brings an energy and just a presence to the team. And he did that on both ends tonight. A lot of times we see it defensively, but the way that he controlled the game offensively, he made some shots. Proud of how he brought it today.
I really like him. I will say, it's not like he's going to make a change to their team in the future, but a good guy to have around for sure. He's been a good defender on the ball and makes some plays. He actually, 4-7 from 3 in this game. He was definitely a bright spot. Jordan Bowden was not the most impressive, but he was okay. Five fouls, pretty aggressive defensively. 6 points, 5 rebounds, 3 assists. They actually missed all three of his shots from the 3-point line, but got to the line 6 times, made all 6. Again, not going to be a huge part of the future, I don't think. Miles Norris was okay, hit 3 threes in this game, 8 rebounds. I thought he played pretty well. I've been kind of surprised and confused why he hasn't played more, to be honest with you. But for whatever reason, they've not wanted to do that, and we'll leave it there for now. EJ Liddell was not quite as effective as he was the other night. So I talked about this extensively on Sunday, but he was really, really productive, like scoring-wise on Sunday. Tonight, he was 1 of 8 from the floor and 0 of 4 from 3. So that's obviously going to be limiting to how good you were. He did rebound the ball well, 7 rebounds, had a block shot, had 2 assists. He draws fouls. He's very physical. I thought he was a little bit more, probably too reliant on that foul drawing aspect in this game, kind of maybe too much of the physicality stuff. Not his best work, but they were still better with him on the court in this game, and he ended up closing the game, and with good reason. To the starters, again, Matthews was kind of a non-factor, did not score in 14 minutes, 2 rebounds, 2 assists, only took 1 shot. Rob Baker, it's been a rough one, I would say, for the most part this week for him. He played pretty well in G League last year, I have to say, but he had 1 good stretch in the third quarter, which I will acknowledge. He had 17 points, but on 15, 16 shooting possessions, something like that. So it wasn't like he was awful, but he had some rough moments for sure. 4 of 7 from 3. Sorry, 4 of 7 from 2. 1 of 6 from 3. Got to the line 7 times. Defensively, not the best. So, yeah, we'll leave it there. Moses Wood took 10 shots, 6 threes, 10 points, 4 rebounds, had 2 turnovers, and 5 fouls in 27 minutes. Gueye was okay, I thought. 10 points, 3 rebounds, and an assist, 3 turnovers. Has not been the best week for Mo, but he's been fine, I think, and was probably a little bit more under control tonight. It was actually strange. You might think it would be the opposite because Gueye was the best prospect on the court for the Hawks in this game. So you would think maybe he would kind of over-index and take the ball and take too many shots. He actually was less aggressive on his own shot than he was when they had everybody, which is a little bit strange. But I thought he played reasonably well defensively. Hopefully the hip stuff is not a huge concern for Mo, but he left the game in the second half, never returned, only played 16 minutes. But I thought he was okay when he was out there. And then we'll end with Keaton Wallace. So Wallace had 13 points, 5 assists, 3 steals, and 2 blocks in 24 minutes. I thought he had a rough start to this game, particularly on offense, but defensively was quite good the entire way. I thought Wallace and Joyner were both really, really good on that end of the floor. And I actually asked Norred about Wallace after the game because, again, he's a newly signed two-way guy, but I hadn't had a chance to actually hear what Norwood had to say about him. So here's what that clip was after the game.
I think it goes back to, kind of what we've been saying all week as far as like the development is the priority and, allowing him to continue to just learn our system and grow in our system. He's a guy that can control the ball and control the team. And so it's been good to see him do that. How can we just continue to, help him do that, see things? He's doing that at a good clip right now. But all of us have room to grow.
I also spoke to Wallace relatively briefly, I would say, after the game. But my first time talking to Keaton one-on-one, he seems to be very happy to be in Atlanta, to be sure. Talked about the cohesion, really enjoying playing with Joyner, a guy that they went back to College Park last year. Both Norred and Keaton were very upbeat about the way this team has kind of gelled together. Obviously, the results have not been great so far, but they're clearly like having fun playing with one another. Also, Wallace talked about kind of wanting to work through his ball screen navigation on offense and defense. Defensively, it's definitely a strength of his, but offensively, it's not like there were some moments in the first half in particular where he's kind of forcing a little bit. He's not the most natural creator in the world. He can create a little bit of offense. 5 assists. He's not a 0 on the ball, but he's not a high usage player. So like the most recent comp that everyone's made, and it's not my original thought, is Trent Forrest. I think Keaton has more juice offensively than Trent did, which probably leads to a little bit more of an upside play. He's not the youngest guy in the world, but I think it was an appropriate use of a two-way. If you watch the first quarter of this game, you probably hated the two-way contract, and then after that, he was pretty good. But it was nice to talk to him, and I thought he was good in this game. You heard that from Norred. He seems to be pretty pleased with him as well. So another guy to focus on. So from here, we don't know who's going to play on Friday. I don't know. Obviously, we do know that Bufkin and Jurisic are gone as far as availability to play. TBD on Risacher, TBD on Gueye, TBD on Windler. If they all don't play, the Hawks are down to 9 guys available, including Ongenda, who's not played yet. So that's a pretty shallow bench for a upcoming back-to-back. Because again, the Hawks play on Friday night and Saturday. So tough stuff there. If nobody comes back, we will see how they handle that in the near future, and I will adjust accordingly as far as my recording schedule and all that stuff. But we'll have shows after both games. At least that's the plan at this point in time. And plenty to discuss. Again, a lot of summer league teams have fewer interesting roster players than the Hawks even did tonight. Because one more time, Mo Gueye, who of course got hurt too, but played some tonight, Keaton Wallace, and E.J. Liddell are all on the team as of right now. And then you throw in guys like Norris, who was on the two-way before. Like they still have guys to talk about and guys to observe. I did see, and I don't blame anybody for doing this. People kind of, as soon as Risacher was ruled out, like, all right, I'm tapping out. It's a 9:30 start. I get it. Trust me, I do. But we'll be here. So if you miss anything, I'll have breakdowns after the games on Friday and Saturday. In the meantime, if the Hawks make a move or anything on Thursday, I will do a podcast. If not, I do have to travel back to Atlanta. This is my last game in Las Vegas before I go home. I'll be watching from my couch along with all of you on Friday and Saturday. But please go ahead and subscribe to this podcast. Hopefully you enjoyed the coverage from the desert. And I always like to be on the scene to get a little bit of those extra nuggets and intel stuff from behind the scenes. But in the meantime, again, as far as program schedule is concerned, after the game Friday, after the game Saturday, and then we'll be diving into the rest of the summer beyond that. Please subscribe to the podcast on Apple, Spotify, Overcast, especially on YouTube as well. Please like this episode on YouTube and go ahead and follow the show on that platform. Follow the show on Twitter as well at Locked On Hawks. Follow me there at BT Rowland. Also write about the Hawks and share some extra audio stuff at patreon.com/BT Rowland. Thanks for listening, everybody. Hopefully you enjoyed your Thursday as you're listening to this podcast, and we'll see you again at the very latest after the game on Friday.